The coins in your pocket are worth almost nothing individually. A penny, 2 pence, 50 pence. Small change, easy to ignore. But taken together, British coins now represent a system worth billions of pounds. And that system was not built overnight. It was built by kings, wars, shortages, reforms, and one of the oldest financial monopolies in Europe. This is not just the history of money. It is the history of power stamped in metal, of who got to decide what counted as value and who paid the price when that value changed. Because for more than 1,000 years, British coins have done more than buy bread or pay wages. They have financed wars, protected royal authority, moved wealth upward, and quietly shaped the daily lives of millions. Today, the coins of the United Kingdom form part of a cash system worth billions in circulation. But to understand how Britain's coins became worth billions, we need to go back to a time when the value of a coin could collapse because the king needed money. This is the King's Ghost Laws. Today's case, the long financial history behind Britain's coins. In early medieval England, coins were not simply money. They were a statement of sovereignty. The right to mint coins was not open to everyone. It belonged to the ruler. That mattered enormously, because if you control the mint, you control trust. And if you control trust, you control trade. By the Anglo-Saxon period, English kings had already understood this. A coin was a tiny piece of state authority. It carried the ruler's name, the ruler's image or symbol, and the ruler's guarantee of weight and metal content. In other words, a coin was not just silver. It was a royal promise. And that promise had a price. Every time coins were issued, reissued, withdrawn, reminted, or altered, someone gained and someone lost. The crown could profit from minting. Moneyers could profit from exchange. Merchants could gain certainty. Ordinary people could lose purchasing power if the metal changed or if old coins were suddenly called in. From the beginning, British coinage was financial policy enforced through law. Not a neutral tool, a controlled system, and like every controlled system, it created winners. In a low-cash medieval economy, coinage carried disproportionate importance. Most people did not hold great stores of wealth in coins, but wages, rents, taxes, and military payments depended on them. If the money changed, the whole economy felt it. A bad harvest hurt. A war hurt. But a damaged coin system could spread that pain everywhere. And kings had a constant temptation. If you need money quickly, there are only so many places to find it. You can tax more, you can borrow, or you can alter the coinage, reduce the silver content, recall old coins and issue new ones, charge for reminting, change legal tender rules. All of these are legal tools. All of them affect wealth. This is where coin history becomes financial history, because every reform in British coinage raised the same question. Who absorbs the cost? The state? The wealthy? Or the public? For most of history, it was the public. One of the oldest financial dangers in coinage is debasement. Debasement sounds technical. In practice, it means something simple. The coin still says it is worth the same amount, but the metal inside is worth less. That difference is profit for the issuer and loss for everyone else. This happened repeatedly across European history, and England was no exception. When rulers reduced precious metal content or altered coin standards, they effectively extracted value from the economy. Quietly, legally, efficiently. To a government under pressure, that looks attractive. To everyone being paid in those coins, it is a hidden transfer of wealth. Your wages still arrive. Your coins still look official, but they buy less trust than before. That gap between stated value and underlying value is where states have always been tempted to operate. And once people notice, they react. They hoard good coins, spend bad ones, melt valuable metal, refuse suspect currency, demand payment in more stable forms, which means the law has to step in harder. So coin history is never just about metal. It is about law forcing confidence into a financial system that keeps drifting. By the late 17th century, Britain faced a serious coin crisis. Silver coins had been clipped for years, not metaphorically, literally. Tiny amounts of silver were shaved from the edges by criminals and opportunists again and again until many coins were underweight. Still circulating, still nominally valid, but increasingly unreliable. This was a national trust problem. If coinage becomes too damaged, trade slows, prices wobble, people reject coins, tax collection suffers, the state loses authority. So in the 1690s, Britain launched one of the most important monetary repairs in its history, the Great Recoinage. This was expensive, very expensive. The government had to withdraw damaged hammered silver coinage and replace it with machine-struck coins that were harder to clip and easier to standardize. That meant enormous administrative cost, minting cost, transport risk, and disruption to trade. The exact historical figures vary by category and source, but the scale was enormous for the time. A national operation costing sums that, in modern terms, would run into many millions, and arguably far more when measured by state capacity and economic disruption.
And here is the key point. Britain was willing to spend heavily to restore trust in coinage, because once trust in money goes, everything starts to crack. This is one of the reasons Britain's coins eventually became part of a billion-pound system, not because they were always stable, but because the state repeatedly chose to defend their legitimacy at great cost. The Royal Mint was never just a factory. It was a state instrument, a place where law, metal, and power met. Every coin issued by the state carried a message. This is acceptable value. This is legal money. This is backed by authority. And over time, that authority became one of Britain's strongest economic advantages. People trust stable money. Stable money supports trade. Trade builds taxation. Taxation builds armies, navies, empires, and institutions. So when we ask how Britain's coins became worth billions, the answer is not only that there are many coins in circulation. The answer is that Britain built institutions strong enough to make those coins believable. That sounds abstract. It isn't. A coin system that people trust attracts commerce. A coin system tied to law reduces friction. A coin system recognized across markets creates scale. And scale is where billions begin. At some point, the value of coinage stops being mainly about the metal and starts being about the system. This is the key transition. A silver coin once had obvious intrinsic value. A copper or nickel coin much less so. Modern coinage is not valuable because of the raw metal inside it. Its value comes from legal recognition, public trust, and national circulation. That shift matters financially, because once money becomes system value rather than metal value, the state gains far greater flexibility. It can mint coins whose face value exceeds their material value. It can produce currency more cheaply than the amount the public accepts it for. That difference is called seigniorage, and seigniorage is one of the oldest quiet profits in monetary history. If it costs far less than £1 to produce a pound coin, the issuing authority gains from that spread. Across millions and millions of coins, that becomes serious money. Not overnight, not in one dramatic seizure, but gradually, structurally, systemically. That is part of how Britain's coin system became worth billions. Not because each coin was precious, but because the system became vast, efficient, and legally protected. Then came decimalization. In 1971, Britain abandoned its old pounds, shillings, and pence structure and moved to the decimal system we use today. This was one of the biggest practical monetary transitions in modern British history. It sounds administrative. It was not. Every till, every shop, every accounting habit, every pricing structure, every consumer had to adapt. The state had to redesign coins, educate the public, manufacture replacements, and manage one of the largest everyday transitions in the financial life of the country. That cost money, a great deal of it. But it also modernized the system. It made British currency easier to use, easier to scale, easier to integrate into modern finance. Decimalization did not just change coin design. It helped create a more efficient monetary environment. And efficient systems compound. When a country of tens of millions uses one trusted, standardized system every day, the aggregate value of that circulating coinage becomes immense. That is how you move from coin-by-coin thinking to system-level thinking, from pennies to billions. Now we arrive at the modern question. How much are Britain's coins actually worth? Not as collector's items,
Not melted down, not in a museum, as a functioning monetary system in circulation. The answer is billions. The total face value of coins circulating in the UK has, in recent years, sat in the multi-billion pound range. The exact figure changes over time as coins are minted, withdrawn, hoarded, spent, lost, or replaced. But the broad reality is clear. The low-value coins in your drawer, the pound coins in vending machines, the change in supermarket tills, the jars in kitchen cupboards, the spare cash in wallets and tills and transport systems. Together, they represent a monetary infrastructure of enormous scale. And that scale tells us something important. Coins survive because they remain useful, even in a digital economy, even with contactless payments, even with banking apps. They are small, physical, trusted units of state-backed value. And when tens of millions of people keep using them, even casually, the total becomes extraordinary. This is why the title is not exaggeration. Britain's coins really did become worth billions. Not because one rare coin was priceless, but because an entire legal and financial system made billions of pounds in coinage normal, invisible almost, until you stop and think about it. So who benefited from all this? The easy answer is the state, the crown historically, then Parliament, then the modern state apparatus built around minting, regulation, legal tender, and monetary trust. But the deeper answer is more interesting. Stable coinage helped merchants, then banks, then industrial expansion, then imperial trade, then modern retail and logistics. Reliable money reduces friction, and whenever friction falls, wealth can scale faster, which means coinage did not just support transactions, it supported concentration. The people best positioned to exploit a stable monetary system always gain more from it than those living transaction to transaction. That is true now, it was true then. Good money helps everyone function,
but it helps sophisticated institutions compound faster. That is one reason Britain's financial system became so powerful, and one reason the history of coinage is also the history of who had access to scale. At this point, you might ask, why should anyone care about old coins in a world of digital payments? Because the story is not really about coins. It is about legitimacy. It is about who has the right to define value, who guarantees trust, who profits from the system once everyone accepts it. Coins are simply the clearest physical reminder that money is never just money. It is law. It is power. It is design. It is history stamped into something small enough to ignore, which is exactly why it matters. The coins in your pocket look ordinary because the system behind them worked so well for so long that it became invisible. But that invisibility was built, defended, legislated, paid for, sometimes at huge cost. How Britain's coins became worth billions is, in the end, a story about trust enforced by authority. Kings minted coins to project power. Governments defended currency because disorder was expensive. The public absorbed the cost of reform, clipping, replacement, and transition. And over centuries, the system grew so stable, so ordinary, so deeply accepted, that billions of pounds in coinage became unremarkable. That is the real achievement. Not the metal, not the design, the belief. Because once a nation believes in its money strongly enough, small change becomes a billion-pound institution. This has been the King's Ghost Laws. Next time, we'll look at another law where history, property, and money collide in ways most people never notice until it is far too late. If you want more investigations into the financial ghosts hidden inside British law, subscribe. Until then, look more closely at the coins in your pocket. They are carrying far more history than they appear to be worth.